In the second-hand set of dimensions, on an astral plane that was never meant to fly, through wavering star mists, see the Grey Satuin. Drifting onwards through space, atop the shell of the world's turtle, are 4 giant elephants, upon whose broad shoulders rests the Discworld. Welcome to Dining Table Discworld. We're reading through the Discworld novels and discussing them at our dining table. Be aware there will be spoilers for the current book and others in the series.
Hello and welcome to Dining Table Discworld. I'm Dave.
I'm Kathy.
And today we are talking about The Last Continent, published in 1998, and another Rincewind novel. Let's see if we like it better than the last one. So Kathy, what is the synopsis?
At the Unseen University, the librarian is ill, which makes the books rowdy. The wizard faculty reckons they can only cure him with magic by knowing his old human name, which he refuses to give. The only person who might know is a certain former library assistant. Rincewind is in a dry red land, subsisting with supernatural help, when a kangaroo tells him he has to save the land, and perhaps already has, as time's all scrunched up there. Searching for Rincewind, the wizard faculty discover a portal to a strangely accommodating island and, along with the housekeeper Mrs. Whitlow, end up stuck thousands of years in the past. The island turns out to be the home of a god who is curiously keen on evolution. Ponder Stibbons almost stays to research, but rejoins the faculty as they sail away to a sea-girt continent. Rincewind has various adventures in XXXX, running away from as many as he can, encountering rangers, sheep, watchmen, cooks, another wizard university, and drag queens on the way. Until at last he summons the Unseen University faculty back to the present, and finally brings the wet to a place that has never known rain. We understand that the term Indigenous Australians is broad, and that it is better to name specific communities, but as this fantasy is, to quote the author, not a book about Australia, no, it's about somewhere entirely different, which just happens to be, here and there, a bit Australian. So no existing communities are actually named, and so that's what we're going to go with where relevant.
So, yes, the big question being, did we like this better than Interesting Times?
Yes.
I mean, the lack of massive content warning at the start is a step forward.
Yes. that was more checking and trying to educate ourselves.
I think a context information.
Yes, no, that's true. Yes.
Yes, not a content warning, a context information.
Which I don't know how much we're going to need specifically, but as we'd looked it up.
Yes. What did you think? What did you think?
So this is one of the few Discworld books I can remember when I read it the first time, because I remember being at the swimming pool I worked in during my second year of sixth form and trying to describe the kind of island with the wizards and the god of evolution bit to a colleague who it turned out, I think, had read Pratchett, did like Discworld, but then I think I felt a bit bashed about it in some way because I was quite an awkward teenager, so didn't really chat about that much. But that does mean that I can therefore pin that I must have been 17, 18 when I read it, because there's a lot of other ones that I read between the ages of sort of 15 and 18. Well, I just read a lot of them in a short time, so I just remembered it was the Australian one, and I didn't remember much about what happened with Rincewind at all. I remember there were some drag queens and was a bit confused with that until, I guess, some point not too long later, I saw Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and I was like, oh, okay, it's about this. And then, that's...
Yeah, I think this one was for me, it was the Australian one, and that was about as far as I could have remembered before reading it again. I'm sure I've read it a couple of times, leading up to this, but it would not be one I go back to primarily because it's a Rincewind heavy book.
I think I'd only read it once before, yeah. It'll have been on my Discworld shelf.
So I'm going to go, it's all right. All right, mate. I'm sorry.
You said you weren't going to do that.
I didn't say good day at the start of the thing, so I'm.
I mean, yeah, I quite liked it. I suppose it's coming off of one we particularly disliked in this sub-series, and so therefore the only way is up.
Yeah, I think I'm going to poke quite a few holes in bits of it, but I don't. I think that's more because I think it's possibly due to Rincewind I'm not negatively disposed to Rincewind, but I find...
I felt that maybe the impression you're giving.
Okay, I possibly don't find his books as entertaining, but, that's, But I think I have a few narrative problems with it, but we'll get to that.
Okay. Well, I guess the other thing we want to talk about is what do we know about Australia, particularly, I guess, any of the pop culture that related to Australia in, I suppose, the 80s and 90s?
Well, obviously, I have seen both Crocodile Dundee films.
I've not seen either of those.
And Mad Max, so therefore I must be an expert.
I have seen Fury Road.
Although I have also now...
And I've heard the Tina Turner song.
I have also now... as of yesterday, seen Priscilla Queen of the Desert.
Because I had seen Priscilla Queen of the Desert, and then you said you hadn't seen it, so we had to watch that. And I've also seen Muriel's Wedding, and I looked up, and those both came out the same year, so that was a good year for Australian cinema. I don't know what's happening the rest of the time in Australian cinema, if I'm entirely honest, but I like both those films.
I think
one features more in this than the other.
I think my knowledge of Australia kind of mirrors the sort of Australia that's portrayed in the book, in that it is all the white European culture side of things, and I know very little about the Indigenous Australian side of things.
That's not a thing we'd talk about. Actually, the other thing I would say about, the 90s that I would know about Australia was Neighbours, which, again, I don't know if Sir Terry ever watched, because there's nothing in there that I can think of that's about that, although I may, now that I think about it, I've been watching Neighbours a little bit. Well, no, I will have seen it, but I probably wouldn't remember much about it until a little bit later. But yeah, there wasn't Ramsay Street or anything, so that'd be the other thing. But again, I'm thinking about it. I can't think there's anything.
I don't think they've
about
ever had a Indigenous.
Well, I couldn't say that for definite.
No,
but it's certainly not something that seems to be particularly in it that I can recall.
So yeah, I think we've seen pop culture stuff based in Australia.
We've seen that Simpsons episode where they go to Australia.
I watched Round the Twist.
Oh yeah, I watched Round the Twist as well.
Yeah, so so I think we have enough context to but we don't
to understand the stereotypes that Sir Terry is using. Yeah,
but we don't have any knowledge of the Indigenous Australian culture and belief system and myths to really comment on those.
Yeah, so I think one thing we're going to discuss a little bit maybe about the setting, which is in this book described as XXXX, which is always spelled ECKS and then 4 times in a row, rather than just the letters, which would be easier. And isn't even technically the Roman numeral for 40, so I don't know why it wasn't that. Also, I kept thinking, it's Forex, because, which is not mentioned here at all, but I think it's because in a previous book in a footnote, where, again, we've discussed before, sometimes things in footnotes or little asides become whole books later, and there is mention of Forex, where the wizards wear corks in their hats and surf.
Yeah.
So that, presumes a seed of this. But that would be easier to say.
Yes.
But they sometimes say Exian, which at least is shorter. But I just remembered it either being the letters 4 X's in a row or 4X, which is not actually in this book. So he'd obviously changed his mind on that a little bit. I think that's confusing about this, as we've mentioned, that most of the stuff about Australia we're aware of is from the European settlement culture, is that in XXXX... it's unclear what the split or the situation is between Indigenous people and later arrivals, but there's no colonisation, which makes it kind of weird and perhaps doesn't really work as a comparison, because a lot of the sort of mystical stuff seems to be, at least in aesthetic, related to Indigenous Australian, I guess, artwork mostly. Yeah. But a lot of the stuff, as you say, the cultural stuff we're seeing is familiar to us as people who've only seen things based on the kind of coloniser culture. But in this, the whole idea is that people just arrive on driftwood with camels. Yes. And, which I'm sure is a reference to something. Maybe people actually taking camels to Australia. I did not look that up. I mean, obviously people have taken a lot of animals to Australia, and that, yes. And that's why they're very strict about things now.
Yeah.
But the point is it's unclear most of the time whether anyone is Indigenous or a later arrival, apart from one character who is incredibly xenophobic. And at one point there are people who are also animals, which I'm sure is a reference to something.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of references in this we're not getting, which at least we know. But yeah, it's sort of weird because it doesn't have that colonizer thing, because any people who arrive later who aren't, I guess, indigenous Exians. And again, the word indigenous is only used, I think, once or twice.
I mean, it does. You do get the impression that there's definitely, an indigenous peoples that live there, but we never really see them.
So a lot like Neighbours, actually.
I mean, yeah, there you go. I know. I wonder partly if it's
or Muriel's Wedding, in fairness.
If it's easier to joke about the colonizer, the Western European colonists side of things, rather than a culture that, let's be honest, has been massively oppressed, a huge amount of it is lost. The people that,
Yes.
I think it would be difficult to do that well.
Yes, if you're going to make jokes about anyone, it kind of has to be the colonisers, doesn't it?
Yeah. No worries.
Well, that's the other thing. Obviously, there's various phrases in this which are Australian. And so there's the thing about coming the raw prawn that gets mentioned a few times, which is clearly, are you having a laugh? Which I'd forgotten was even a phrase until we rewatched Priscilla. But then there's also no worries, which I had forgotten came from Australia, because it's just a thing people say, and I say it all the time, especially in text messages or when I'm inviting people to anything. Or if you can't make it, no worries. So to me, it's like, that's just a regular phrase, but I guess it wasn't in 1998. It specifically came from Australia.
Yeah.
And I feel like, it's American stuff that's come over more, but maybe that's just because in the 90s when I was a child, a lot of adults were very funny and correct you to the proper British way of saying things. And now it's just all on the internet, and fair enough. And
yeah. So I think we, in some respects, he makes the right. So Terry makes the right choice of the people to riff and make fun of, and because I think this would be a very uncomfortable book should it have been, if there would have been more.
It feels more comfortable than making fun of people in China, which was our issue with the previous one. But is that just because of race? Well, it's because of race, probably. That's part of it, and also I guess acts as repression. Although I appreciate China, there's a whole lot of big history there. We'll not get into that. Shall we go through some of the characters?
Yes.
So first we'll talk about Rincewind.
If we must.
Well, it is his book. Well, we say this. Most Rincewind's books are Rincewind. So if you look at the various sub-series in Discworld, it tends to be, Death, Watch, Witch, Wizards. There's a lot of W's in that.
Yeah.
It just occurs to me. And then maybe Industrial Revolution, depending on how you're looking at it. But Wizard tends to involve mostly Rincewind books. But as I think we discussed a little bit in Interesting Times, Rincewind and this version of the Wisdom Faculty are only really together in Interesting Times. And this is maybe one where they're actually really together very much at all.
And very briefly. I mean, it's only towards the end.
But I mean, it was only towards the beginning in Interesting Times.
Yes,
and then so it's one of these things where you say wizard, but that's actually a few different things. And normally the wizards are people who kind of appear in other books a bit more.
I mean, because you've had them moving pictures, Hogfather. They turn up all over the place. They turn up all over the place. So yes, this is the first one, which is
very, very wizard. Well, I guess Interesting Times a bit, but this even more so. It feels like it's fairly equally split between Rincewind and the faculty.
Yeah. So Rincewind. Rincewind in this is doing what Rincewind does best, which is avoiding everything, which I kind of feel doesn't make for an interesting story.
I think it depends, but I appreciate you're not enjoying this. I think with this one, because what normally happens is Rincewind is there and he has some travelling companions who he is sarcastic at, or they're sarcastic at him, or they don't kind of, they've got very different goals and aims to him. And here he is largely just wandering around on his own, and he just kind of has...
grumping at a kangaroo that appears.
Yes, so there's a magic kangaroo. Oh, it's obviously some sort of trickster type spirit, and it can change shape, and we'll probably get into that. There's also the fact that he is... Well, I mean, everyone who's a wizard is getting things way too easy in this. Yes. At least on the island it made sense. But yes, because Rincewind keeps looking under stones and inside hollow logs and things and finding sandwiches and cake and snacks.
I think that's the thing. I think in this he's kind of dumped... Obviously, at the end of Interesting Times, he's dumped in the middle of what we presume is the XXXX outback. And, to fend for his... And let's be honest, Rincewind is not too bad at fend for himself.
Well, he had the whole thing on that other island before. Survival he can do.
Yeah, but it's very obvious when we see him now that someone's helping him. Because, he lifts up a log, there's a ham sandwich underneath. We presume this is whoever the trickster, the kangaroo
Well, is it? I was not sure if it was the kangaroo or the creator. There's sort of two figures there, isn't it? And the kangaroo's kind of working on behalf of the creator
because they feel that Rincewind needs to say, "Bring back the wet," and we're tuning into our very Dune. Yes, yeah, I know you said that, and I'm just going to blatantly steal it.
Yeah, I was just watching it. It's like, here's a deserty place, and somebody needs to bring in the rain. It's like, no, I've watched this movie, but there's not a girl at the beginning giving me all the exposition.
No.
Yes. So what happens is that the kangaroo who says his name is Scrappy, obviously you know what that's a reference to, turns up and tells Rincewind. The thing is that it sort of explains that the time there is very, like, it's all, I think I described it scrunched up. It's very, so something's been there for thousands of years, but it wasn't there for thousands of years a few minutes ago. And that Rincewind has already saved the world. And if you look at what appears to be very ancient paintings, and the paintings are a big part of it, it sort of shows Rincewind doing something. Yeah. And that must have been painted ages ago because it's like in the rock. Yeah.
But obviously, Thief of Time, we learn that they dump a load of, they quite often just dump a load of excess time.
Oh, I hadn't remembered that.
Yeah,
we haven't got to that.
Yeah, it's something there. So it's something that we're.
I think this is obviously before Sir Terry came up with that as a way to explain any timey stuff. But I think the concept in and of itself, the idea that you've got a place where it's kind of being created. Because that's the whole point, is that the continent, it says last continent, it's the last continent to be created. It is in some senses only just being created, but because the creator is outside of time, all the time's it's all being put there all at once. Yeah. So it's all a bit, which again is an interesting temporal thing. And speaking of Thief of Time, I noticed that there was a mention of Bonsai Mountains, but that was kind of in relation to Pond of Stibbons' temperament.
Yeah.
But so Rincewind does this thing of like, he's given the call to action, he runs away from it, he grumpily resists any attempts to get him to do anything, even though he's told he's already saved the land. And then he just kind of, goes from thing to thing to thing, and there's a lot of bars, there's a lot of drinking, there's some animal people, there's a crocodile called Crocodile, there's a dwarf called Mad, who has a cart that's very spiky.
Yeah.
Well, so, I now understood that reference. Yeah. Because I've seen Fury Road. And he tries to help some sheep, and then they think he's a sheep smuggler. A sheep thief. Rustler. Yes. Is that the term? And then he gets put in prison, he's going to be hung, and then he's able to escape some assistance. And then there's the whole thing about making ballads. And then he just kind of goes through various different stereotypes and things. All the stuff about how weak the beer is, how you can drink loads of beer and it's not sludgy and thick like the beer back in Ankh-Morpork. Yeah. There's also, so he meets so many people. I don't remember who he meets, like rangers. There's stuff about like having a horse that can go upside down and stuff.
Yeah.
But was that the trickster, or was it just like a weird horse?
I don't. It's difficult.
The problem is every time he encounters an animal, it might be the kangaroo trickster character.
Yeah,
he's certainly very. There's something called Roo Beer, and he keeping kangaroo posters, and sometimes there's any picture of a kangaroo is probably watching him. And yes, when he escapes, people are more keen on ballads than they are on justice.
They want to make sure that they've got a good part in the ballad, and
which I assume is the Waltzing Matilda reference. There are other references to Waltzing Matilda as well, stuff about whistling, billy boiling. I remember very little else of that song. Oh, at one point he hides in the opera house is described as like a box of tissues. Which is like, that's not quite how I thought it was in the opera house, but I suppose now you say it. And then there's there's a reference to Peach Melba in that there's a chef who's all upset because he has to create a pudding for this rising star soprano, but the problem is other people have had quite good names, but her surname is Butts, and she's Nellie Butts. So what am I supposed to do? And then Rincewind basically grabs some peaches, puts them together and says, call it Peach Nelly. The reference obviously being that Peach Melba was actually made in London by a French chef for Australian soprano Dane Nellie Melba. But that's what that's about. Yeah. The joke is peach, but...
Yes.
He eventually gets to what I think is like the very plot relevant. And the whole point is also he's discovered that there's no water, there's no rain. Like he mentions rain and they want to understand what that is. Water doesn't come from the sky. So everything's always being pumped. They're always pumping out of the ground. And it's clear the water's starting to run out. And that's obviously a problem. But it feels very much in the background and not a big concern, apart from Rincewind thinking about occasionally, because mostly he's just trying to run away from stuff and not where he's running to.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of there's lots of oddities. Obviously the implication is this place has never had any rain.
Yeah,
but there is rivers, there's dry riverbeds, there's bridges over rivers where rivers would be.
Yeah, but they're just sandy, aren't they?
Yeah,
so.
it's just an odd. It's odd. I mean, yes, Rincewind does do a lot of stuff, but I feel like with a lot of Rincewind stuff, I feel like he's not driving the plot forward. He's going through the plot, but only because it just happens to take place where he is. I mean, the kangaroo nudges him a little bit in the right direction.
I think there's a bit more than that.
But it does feel like it's like, well, he's just going through, and I think that's part of my problem with him. He's a very passive, which I appreciate. What is kind of the point? He is very passive.
Not quite passive. Well, no,
Yeah.
He's not passive because he is active because he is moving. That's the whole point.
Okay, yes,
he's always right, but the point is he's always running away from something or like refusing to get involved.
Yes,
which means stuff has to happen to him, and there is an element of comedy with that. That's quite good. And I appreciate perhaps you don't appreciate it very much, and I'm all right with it sometimes. I think normally Rincewind has some travelling companions with him, and he just kind of doesn't even have that now. So it's just kind of Rincewind
doesn't
being
even
grumpy.
have the luggage.
Yeah, the luggage was stuck in rock and then gets mined out.
I don't even understand what the hell that was about. Well, how did the luggage...
Because the time's all scrunched up, so sometimes stuff arrived... Like, if Rincewind arrived and the luggage arrived different seconds, it was thousands of years apart, because the time is all scrunched up, so that's where the luggage is in rocks. And then some miners dig the luggage out, and then the luggage gets adopted by some travelling drag queens.
As they actually found.
Which, I think, now that we've watched the film, makes it... Was it Bill or Bob?
Bob.
Does that make the luggage Bob from Priscilla, Queen of the Desert?
Maybe?
Yes, the luggage gets filled with shoes and gets lots of little tiny shoes for its many feet. But yes, the luggage mostly isn't in it. Yes, that's the thing. Most of the stuff that normally be with Rincewind isn't there. It's just Rincewind moving through a landscape, meeting a load of people.
And then immediately attempting to get away from them.
Well, kind of. I know there's the thing we upset some people. So they challenge him to a sheep shearing competition, and he does like the sheep haircut, and then suddenly he does like loads and loads of sheep because like the kangaroo gives him the power to shear loads of sheep.
Yeah.
So there's lots of various like here's an Australian thing kind of encounters. They'll say something like, "Oh, you come in the raw prawn," and he's like, and he doesn't understand what they mean. So there's a lot of plays on misunderstanding Australian slang.
Yeah.
And again, people saying their worries, and he starts saying it a lot. And again, I see how that worked in 98, but now that's just a regular thing people say. We've just appropriated that term now, and we have it here too.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Rincewind.
Yeah. The other person whose book I feel very strongly is Ponder Stibbons, who's often with the faculty.
Yes.
And sometimes a little bit to the side of the faculty, who are often already at the side of something. He's a bit more centred here.
Usually he's there to provide the actual impetus of the wizards to, the practical wizarding side of things, while the rest of the wizards are off doing something slightly odd, like in Soul Music, when all of the wizards are all getting wrapped up in the music with rocks in. He's there to help actually do the wizarding.
Well, he actually captures some of the music.
And in Hogfather, while the...
Well, he has Hex.
Yes, he's got Hex, but so...
But no Hex really in this.
No Hex really is mentioned briefly, but...
Yeah.
But yes, so he does get a bit more front and centre, because it is a bit more of trying to work things out, but it's also his frustrations with the faculty.
It's more about him as a character. So the thing about his temperament being the kind that would develop Bonsai Mountains, which obviously is picked up later for a different character, what's happened to the wizards is the librarian is ill, and whenever he sneezes, he changes shape into something like red and furry, but not an orangutan. And it's causing problems with the books, and they think, well, the only way to do magic on them is to use the librarian's human name, but the librarian has all trace of that's been removed by the librarian, one assumes. And the only person they think might know is Rincewind, which does raise the question, was Rincewind working in the library before the librarian changed and like at an earlier point in his career at the university?
I can only presume so at this point.
If you want to avoid all the kind of like dead men's boots kind of attacking each other form of promotion they had before, I could see the library would be a place to go for that, and which might be why him and the librarian were there.
I'd also imagine, because of his inability to do actual magic, he wasn't really welcome in a lot of other departments. So, I mean, the library you just have to have a certain degree of respect for the books, which is higher than most normal librarians would require. So yeah, I mean, it would be a relatively...
Well, I mean, here we go. This is your profession. Would Rincewind make a good library assistant?
See, I don't see many skills in him, I don't...
Running away from things.
I don't generally have to run away from things. I haven't seen his ability to shelve. How does he...
I think he'd be all right at that.
It's but I suppose he is good
That's
at...
not the bit we're watching.
But he is good at avoiding things, and to be fair, in the Unseen University Library, you would have to be good at avoiding books trying to lunge at you. So
Yeah.
I think I think generally he can manage it, and imagine that's why he was the assistant librarian rather than the actual librarian.
Well, yes, he was an ape's assistant.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the wizards go to find some sort of, was it the Professor of Unusual Geography or something, and then they find in his office has an ensuite, and through a window in the ensuite there is a tropical island, and they're like, oh, there's a portal, and like, wait, that's Jammy, he's just been going and lying on the beach all the time, no wonder we haven't seen him for ages. And then they go through, but they prop the window open, and Ponder goes with them, because the whole thing is it's Ponder's idea that, well, sorry, I've gone a bit ahead of myself. Ponder's the one who says, well, the person who might know the librarian's name is Rincewind. And it's like, oh, where's this Rincewind fellow? It's like, well, we sent him to this odd place. Oh, okay. So then they go find this geography guy who isn't there, and then they find the portal, and then they all go and have like a little beach
So my
holiday.
question at this point is, where is the wizard, the professor of...
He seems to be dead on the island. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, and how did he create a portal to thousands of years in the past?
Yeah.
There's so many questions at this point.
Yeah, I thought... So the wizards go through, and Ponder's there actually like, we need to find the professor, we need to find Rince, we need to help the librarian. Yeah. And they go to this island, they're just enjoying themselves, and Ponder's... it says that Ponder is one of those unfortunate people cursed with the belief that if only he found out enough things about the universe, it would all somehow make sense. And the fact that he's not looking for a theory of everything, but just a theory of anything.
Yeah.
So Ponder's one of these people, he's a seacraft knowledge, he wants to know about things. He's found a lot of stuff with Hex, which is mentioned briefly, but isn't the main focus. And then all the wizards are just messing about on the beach. But Ponder's actually interested in things and is looking around. And what happens is that they order lunch, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Whitlow, comes out and brings them lunch, but then she basically knocks the thing that was propping the window open, so then the portal's closed, because apparently the portal was tied to the window. There's no explanation as to why this is there.
Windows 98.
Oh, do you think?
A portal, like a window, into this... Because remember how the Windows 98 background screen was this lovely green meadow. Not quite a beach, but, this kind of a...
Oh, the little hill.
Yeah.
The hill with the white blue sky.
It's like a window.
Oh,
I wonder whether it's a reference...
Well, we just decided it is now.
Well, so Terry was big on technology. He would have been.
I think it doesn't relate to Hex. I just assume that's where the computer.
I mean, it may.
End up.
Yeah, it may have been. It may have been something that just a throwaway.
Yes. But what they discover is that everything they need seems to be growing there. So they the plants, they're like, oh, are these bananas? Then they open up, and it's like regular food, and anything they mention seems to grow.
Yeah, so we got this island that we find out is basically the playground for the god of evolution.
Well, so he's not called. That's what Ponder calls him.
Yes,
he's just God.
God, yeah. So it's an interesting idea that these plants, obviously they want to spread their seeds. They want to, so therefore.
And now a load of new creatures have turned up.
The most logical thing to do for the plants is to make sure that they are as beneficial to these creatures as possible.
But the thing that the librarian notices, and then Ponder picks up from what he's saying, is that there's only one of anything.
Yes.
There's only every bird, every shell, every plant, there is one of it. It's like, well, that doesn't really work, does it?
But the idea is that, they've got... Yeah, all these plants are just being really, really, really helpful.
Like they open some and they have literally their cigarette plants, but the seeds seem to be in the filter. So Ponder's trying to figure it out, and so he goes off looking things.
I think it's a good point to mention about the god of evolution, or just God, as
Well, I feel he's a mirror of Ponder.
Okay.
So Ponder eventually finds a cave, and there's this god there who sort of appears as a sort of human, but without the pointy hat. Even though are they all wearing the hats? Maybe they take them off.
Well, I think the idea is he appears as Charles Darwin.
Yes, okay, he appears as Charles Darwin, but he's obviously basing himself on there because he's not seen.
I think it describes that he personifies as kind of how he's seen.
Yeah. So because again, they've noticed, well, there's only one of everything, which leads to them having an early conversation about, well, if there's only one of everything, things can't reproduce. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Although obviously one of them's got seeds in a cigarette filter, so that's how that spreads. And then Ponder finds this garden, and the wizards follow. And the thing with the god was a guy who was with the other gods, and he points at done manifesting. Because at this point, they've also figured out it's thousands of years in the past, because they're looking at the sky, and they're like, well, we don't recognise these constellations. They're like, oh, we're far away. And he's like, no, I think these are what the constellations would look like if the turtle was further, because of course all their constellations change, because the turtle is moving through space. And it is a point that this is one of the few books recently that's actually opened mentioning the Greater Two and going through space, which we haven't had for a while.
No.
Because I think by this point they're like, yeah, everyone's got that that's the deal.
Yeah.
But yes, so Ponder finds him is absolutely fascinating, because what this god is doing is he was with the people on Cori Celesti done manifesting, and I think he just didn't like the other gods. There's all this smiting, there's all this stuff, and he was obviously a bit fed up of it, didn't like this, and decided to go off on his own and research stuff and think things through logically. Yes. And this is why he is the mirror of Ponder, because Ponder spends most of this book being annoyed by the wizards and all their bickering and their not being logical and how they are, and he just wants to ask questions, get sensible answers. I did also feel like at some point that Ponder and Magrat would be good to have a chat when they're a bit like, I'm the young one with these terrible old people who are just very annoying. Regardless of how young they actually are, because again, probably not as young as they're being treated. But although actually, no, Ponder's got a faculty position in there. But yes, so Ponder meets him is fascinating. Then the wizards turn up and start their usual wizard thing, which I think we'll talk about next about the wizards as a group more. And what he finds is the god's making an elephant, and it's got wheels at the front, but like all of its organs are kind of like not in yet because he's building it. Yeah. And Ponder's really fascinated, and the god's saying, well, I'm trying to do things in a more logical way, and I'm trying to set things up so I don't have to constantly be interfering and stuff like that. And I think he's almost trying to take ego out of it, and he's looking at all these, he's interested, so he's made all these different beetles, but only one of everything, all these different plants, and he's they keep doing stuff. Like I don't think he quite wanted them to like grow and change into useful things for people, but that's sort of what they're doing. And then Ponder explains, because again it makes clear earlier on in the book that Ponder's been thinking about stuff that's kind of evolution, that kind of thing. Ponder's the one who says evolution, and God's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good. And I think the thing is that probably in some places now, but certainly back in 98, that would have been a god of evolution is quite he's really toying with some stuff there, because the whole idea of like religion and science and like evolution, creationism, being opposing things, he's got, well, this guy's a god, but like evolution is the thing he's creating. Yeah. And which, in fairness, the earliest natural philosophers who were looking into this stuff were doing it to understand God's creation better. It wasn't like Darwin was there going, I'm going to disprove God. He wanted to know how things worked. Yeah. People want to know how creation worked. And Ponder is increasingly impressed by this and just kind of fanboying over it a bit.
Very much so.
And then he decides he wants to stay, whereas what the wizard's saying is they want to go. So what happens is a big boat kind of grows.
Well, because the god wants to get rid of them because they're causing too much chaos in there.
They are random factors in his nice planned island.
He creates a boat.
Gourd.
Yeah.
The thing that's funny though is that they do point out, well, why is there only one other thing that doesn't work? And he's like, what do you mean? And then this is the bit I can remember, because this was the bit that made me laugh. I think I was trying to explain to a colleague when I worked in the swimming pool, is you then have the wizards who are celibate and frankly very uninformed, as far as one can tell, in that area, trying to explain sexual reproduction to this god. And the bit I remember was saying, the elephant makes never elephants. It's like, well, the trunk's quite handy, but it can't use that kind of detail work. Does it have some sort of tools? And they're trying to explain that the elephant is grows inside the elephant. He's like, that would mean less work for me, but how does that work? How does it get there? And they're all like, and then Mrs. Whitlow comes in, and there's a very funny scene where she's explaining, because she's Mrs. Whitlow.
Yes.
And the idea is that the wizards all move away, and she's explaining, and at one point the god just goes, "It what?" And there was like, what are they talking about? Like, I don't want to know. And it's just very, I remember being amused with that when I was a teenager, and I'm still quite amused by it now.
That's fair enough. And I mean, you kind of, Mrs. Whitlow is kind of, that's her point in this, other than to be subject of annoying. Yeah, anyway, I'll get to that in a bit.
Sure. But yeah, so Ponder, when the wizards are all planning to leave, which is what everyone kind of wants, Ponder's like, no, I'm going to stay. And he says he wants to be the god's assistant. And he's thinking, the god can, and I think Ponder's thinking the god can kind of create like apes and then people, but maybe they'll be better and we can improve things, because the idea is it's thousands of years in the past. So actually, now that I think about it, thousands doesn't seem very long at all, but it is the Discworld, so we'll not. Maybe that's part of the joke, in fact. And in fact, the god's the one who says that, the closest continent's over there. They're it's being created at the moment, you can still hear he's acting like it's a building site, like you can hear the construction noise. Pond decides to stay, and then the god says, he says how much he likes beetles and all sorts of things. And he says, I'm working on something really great. And Pond's like, yes. And the Ponder's thinking, what is the highest form of creature? Obviously man. And then the god shows him his creation, and Ponder races to the beach, jumps into the sea, and gets back on the boat. And it's not until later it's revealed, the god of evolution's great creation that he's working everything towards is the cockroach.
I mean, to be fair, cockroaches are pretty damn hardy.
And it was 1998, so there was a lot more talk of nuclear war being the thing that wiped us all out at that point. So that probably seemed pretty reasonable.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a lot more Ponder. There's a lot more, he's there.
He almost gets this amazing opportunity, because this thing, he's the one who wants to research the island. He's the one who gathers a lot of data.
Yes.
I mean, some of the wizards do, but kind of just because they're hungry or
Them.
But so I feel like it's quite strongly his book as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Shall we talk a little bit about the wizards as a group?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best way to talk about them, because they are kind of,
Well, there's Rid Cully and
then the others.
Yeah,
I mean, I like the wizards, but I felt there was too much wizards. And I think they work much better in a tertiary supporting role in a book.
Yes, it's probably like the other thing. It's like you want something else major and then wizards minor, and this is more kind of equally split between wizards and Rincewind, who's also a wizard. So it's kind of all some kind of wizard.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't do it. Got very much annoyed with the kind of all the fawning over Mrs. Whitlow. And especially when it comes to talking about the sexual reproduction later, it's like it implies that they don't really have an end goal for all of this if they're confused by all of that talk. Yeah, I just
it struck me as very adolescent in some respects.
Yes,
despite the fact that they're old men. But the idea is that they are wizards and wizards celibate. Obviously, previous books have gone into why that's the deal.
Yes,
and there's something kind of monastic about them in some respects. But yes, this idea that and it's made clear at various points they do still experience attraction and I guess sexual urges. It feels uncomfortable to talk about this because they're not even because they're old, because they're just a bit unpleasant. But the point is, I think they've never developed in that, because they've been basically. I mean, there's a bit where there's a lot of talk about how wizardry used to be, like with the fighting people and like the plural wizards used to be war. And it actually says that the Unseen University specifically exists to contain the wizards, which is the opposite of witch magic. You want witches in the community. Wizards, you need to put them away somewhere where they can just squabble amongst themselves and eat big dinners, and they are not a threat. And it says something about the most important magical power of all is the one which persuades you to stop using all the others.
Yeah.
Which I think is quite a good encapsulation of magic users, particularly powerful ones, in Discworld in general. These people are a problem, and they need to be off somewhere. And that's what the Unseen University is for.
Keeping them contained.
And in fact, the start of the book actually has this whole thing that has these very august traditions, including something where the porters are shouting about losing the keys, which they've been doing for hundreds of years, and the wizards tone it down. The porters no. And it's the idea that the wizards are almost kind of remind me of Versailles, where it's a little bit like we need to just get all the nobles away from Paris and away from their areas of influence, and just in Versailles doing a load of very silly rituals so that they're not a threat to the king. And it's not exactly like that. There's no king in this version, but it is just like we've got a population of people that need to be put in a place, they need to be bounded by tradition and rules and nonsense, and just kept out of the community.
Yes, let them do their own thing, but not affecting everyone.
Yes, but it does sort of show that the staff are kind of their own thing, which does relate to Mrs. Whitlow to an extent. But it's a bit adolescence, because it's the idea that they've never therefore really socialised with women. That women are, I mean, this was shown in Equal Rights, women are people who aren't allowed in the university, but they're going through the servants' entrance because they're servants, and they're kind of just like furniture and stuff almost. But But then Mrs. Whitlow, who I guess is the main one the wizards have ever spoken to, as she's the head housekeeper, is a woman they have interacted with, and probably the only woman they've ever really paid much attention to.
Yes.
Despite there obviously are maids around, like it's mentioned. Because I think Mrs. Whitlow's worried that the maids will start slacking off if she's not there.
Yeah.
Some of them, mostly Senior Wrangler, but later also the Dean, possibly catch it. But again, that's quite adolescent. Like if somebody gets a crush on somebody, then maybe other people get crushes on them. And this idea that they don't want to do anything. Yeah, this is an ongoing joke where anytime Mrs. Whitlow sort of does, like, the stuff where the Senior Wrangler just goes, Mwah, he like makes a funny noise.
Yeah.
And it's just to show that he's like a bit turned on.
Yeah, I just...
And again, it's quite adolescent. I mean, I sort of found it funny because I think suppose they wouldn't do anything. They're not sure enough, you know, or anything like that. But which is better than the other group of unpleasant old men we had before.
Fair, yeah, I don't know. I just didn't enjoy that part of it. You know.
Do you feel like maybe you've outgrown that sort of thing and don't enjoy? Like, I could see why a teenager might enjoy this more. But I mean, it's kind of funny, but it is funny a bit like, oh, these guys are a bit rubbish with sex. Yeah. And I think I've already had my rant about how women are not strange, unusual creatures to be treated like something other. And I think having got out of that, I'm like, okay, this is what it is. And I think, and the fact is Mrs. Whitlow seems to be, they seem to be treating her with a huge amount of respect. She was cordoned off, she was separated, she was always safe and fine.
Yeah, they were always looking after her. It was just, and to be honest, I imagine she didn't see any of the stuff that they, but it was just this kind of, this...
I got the impression Mrs. Whitlow was oblivious to certain things, and that's how she operates. It literally says something about, like, Mrs. Whitlow decided at some point it wasn't worth thinking about certain things.
Mrs. Whitlow herself was a perfectly fine character. She was very much a head housekeeper.
Isn't she the one that Granny Weatherwax dealt with, like, back in Equal Rights?
Remember.
I think it's still her.
May well, but yes.
Yeah, because that's so.
So and just so as a character, not a problem with her.
She's not in it much as a person, more as a figure of people's interest. I'm kind of glad that Rid Cully was entirely oblivious to that.
Yes,
he seemed quite annoyed by it. Rid Cully, I say interesting. His management style is actually very. It seems to be in two parts, because when he's... Obviously, there's a whole thing where he stomps around and he shouts at people, but it sort of suggests that in the university, he's suddenly very... He's both meddling and jargon-filled, but also neglectful and unconcerned. So quite often he just wants to ignore everyone and just, shouts at people and stomps around and wants to do his own thing. But he also seems to be, like, asking people what their jobs are. Yeah. And there's stuff about him using jargon and them being a lean, mean team. And like having...
His doors are always open.
Yeah, and then he says, I haven't got a door right now. But just imagine if it's here, it's open. And it's weird because I can see that Pratchett's trying to, riff off of certain management styles and a lot of jargony, buzzwordy stuff.
Very prolific at the time.
I think it's more normalised now, to be honest.
But it was that kind of management. Definitely my door's always open. Lots of jargon.
But also, like, there's a bit where the faculty complained that he asked them what their role was, and they're like, "What kind of question is that to ask somebody who works at a university?"
Yeah,
which I did find quite funny. But it seems odd with his thing of wanting to be kind of left alone to do his own things. It almost feels there's two sides to it, depending on what Pratchett is riffing off of at that moment.
Yeah.
Because some of it is like, that doesn't sound very Rid Cully. That sounds more like a different character, but Rid Cully's sort of in that role. I will say he does seem to be being less mean to the Bursar, who was there, but was not actually the butt of many jokes.
No, I mean, he is, the Bursar is obviously a bit of a problematic figure earlier on in the series.
Well, just because we haven't liked the jokes about his mental health.
I mean, and he's not...
He's only sort of in it. Like, he's not much of the conversation. He's in it more at the end, actually. But, I mean, there is one bit where, when they're discussing how a plant would evolve... Development, quite use the word evolve, but when they're trying to figure out what natural phenomena has caused all these plants, like one of which is making Battenberg, they don't use the word Battenberg, but like it's Battenberg, and cigarettes with filters and stuff. Like, well, tobacco's a plant, but Rid Cully goes, what kind of bird stops flying around for a quick smoke? And the Bursar goes, puffin. And then Rid Cully goes, it's good to see you with us, Bursar. But the point is, he's not being horrible to the Bursar. It feels a bit like that's an improvement.
And it's a lot less of, that he's got to take, he's doing something odd, the odd sentences.
There's a little bit. It still suggests he's not fully with it all the time, but that kind of is, I guess, useful later. And it seems like he's just kind of in the group, but not being targeted.
Yeah.
There was... The thing I found with this, I tend to find the wizards, even though I don't necessarily enjoy them as characters, I kind of enjoy the artistry of how their conversations go. It's not something I'm going to reread like I do with some of the Watch books, where I just really enjoy these characters, but it's something where, one of them will say something, the other one will misconstrue part of it, and then they'll go off on a weird tangent, and when they're talking about, like, Rid Cully's appalled to hear that, like, the trees are all, as he puts it, going at it like knives, which is not a phrase I'd heard before, but... like when Ponder explained how pollination works, and getting the wrong end of the stick, but Pratchett also does stuff like somebody will make terrible jokes, like when they have that boat that's a gourd, and he says, "Oh, it looks a bit of a squash."
Yeah.
And that's a terrible joke.
That is a pretty boring joke.
But it's put in there, but then also they ignore it, and then that person keeps saying it.
Yes.
And so sometimes the joke is the point, sometimes it's a side thing. So I think there's quite a lot of skill and usher into how he's done that. So I just decided to enjoy that, I think.
No, definitely when you've got the wizards, you definitely do... They have their own feel, and they're definitely... Yes, I mean, I think there is a lot to enjoy around the wizards, and I do enjoy the wizards when they're
diluted, maybe.
Yeah, and I just felt that there was a little bit too much of them.
We don't want concentrated wizards.
No,
it's like squash. You have to dilute them with something else.
Yes. You know, and just in this case, I was not... There's just a little bit too much for me.
Sorry, I just realised I said squash again.
Yeah, I know, I was just letting that one go.
That was unintentional, but yeah.
So, you know, but as I say, as characters, you know, they were... And they've all got their own rough personalities, you know. I say rough.
Do they?
I say rough. I mean, you know.
Okay, and this one I understood the Wrangler was the one who originally liked Mrs. Whitlow, and then the Dean came in on it. The Dean... lecturer in runes, I don't know, and then there's a chair as well. I'm not sure. Okay, it's just a massive pointy-hatted, bearded old man.
Which is kind of the point as well, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving away from the wizard.
Did we want to in any way compare Unseen University with the new university that Rincewind finds in XXXX?
Yeah, we'll get it.
So Rincewind, he goes to various towns with names like Did You Bring a Beer Along? And then there's a city which is Bugger Up. So there's Bugger Up University, which is mostly made out of corrugated metal.
Yeah. Although they do have a very, very, very tall tower.
Well, it doesn't look very tall.
It doesn't look very tall at all.
No, it looks quite tall.
It's a very magical tower because it does a very good, not quite TARDIS impression, but it does distort.
No, because it's bigger on the outside.
Yes.
That's the point. Rincewind ends up at this university. It turns out that the Arts Chancellor there is also called Rincewind, but he's Bill Rincewind.
Yes.
And he asked Rincewind what his first name is, and Rincewind said, I don't think I ever had one, I don't know. Rincewind's background is very unclear. He appears to have no family of origin, it's not clear what happened, but probably it's very sad.
I get the impression he was dumped at the university or the you know, and then that's it, really, you know.
In that case, he's quite well adjusted, having been raised by wizards. Particularly the older form of wizards, I guess. Anyway, yes, I think there's been a joke previously about his mother ran away before he was born.
Yes.
Which is funny, but also sad. Rincewind tries to describe rain and clouds to the Exian wizards, and they can't understand clouds. Like, what do you mean? Like, but water is
heavy.
Water is heavy. It couldn't be in the sky.
Yeah.
And Rincewind's there like, I can't really explain rain. I don't know how it works. I just know it is. And then he goes up the tower, which seems like it's very short. I mean, it's interesting that perhaps just a bit like, well, the university's got to have a tower, and it's a bit like, well, that's certainly what my alma mater. So it's kind of their deal. Yes, and then he goes up the tower, and then the tower is actually ridiculously high, and you can see, I think, way around, but it doesn't look very high. And then they all end up going underground to this rocks, and basically, through the time being scrunched up thing.
Well, also because they come through as paintings, don't they?
Yeah, so what happens is there's paintings in the rocks.
So the wizards are basically being very wizardy. They get to XXXX.
Oh, that's what we didn't say about the storm.
Yeah,
did we?
While it was being built, they get through this massive storm that's surrounding the.
It's Seagate, and basically the idea is there's no rain in the interior, but about was it like a mile out to sea? There's just basically storms around the entire thing, which made me think of that thing I heard recently about the Antarctic current. There's a current that goes right the way around the Antarctic.
But
and the whole thing that the waves get terrible, and then the Bursa learns how to surf, because what happens, it turns out the gourd boat, its seeds are surfboards.
Basically, yeah.
So then the Bursa learns to surf, the Bursa's surprisingly good at surfing, and then they land, but because they're thousands of years in the past, that's when it's being created.
Yeah, so they basically run into the creator.
One of the ways you can tell, I think the only way you can tell necessarily what colour that anyone's speaking to is that suddenly Pratchett will point out that neither Rincewind nor the Bursa think of racism. Mm. The idea is that the creator is incredibly dark-skinned. I think that's early on in the book when Rincewind briefly encounters him at the start, and then towards the end when the wizards encounter him. And the Bursa, who is, I guess, the most Zen-like of them, if that's it's probably not the right term, in fact, but he's, because he's not always there mentally anyway, he watches the creator basically doing the paintings on the rocks. There's a lot of talk about the artwork, which I think we'll get into, but one thing that happens is that the other wizards turn up, see somebody painting, snatch the brush off him and start messing about, trying to draw a duck.
Basically being...
rude idiots.
Yeah. And obviously, so they're doing that while some of the others go through his bag, which which has the magic MacGuffin in it that they'll need later.
I mean, the wizards are very rude. And they try to go, oh, look, I can do better than you. Here, let me show you how it's done. Because and it's that whole thing. I suppose that's the coloniser thing. It's the whole thing is you see what somebody's done. You're like, well, that's not how we do it. You've obviously not learned properly. Let me show you how it's done. When you're like, actually, this was perfectly fine. For where it was, it just looks different to what you're used to. Like generations of Europeans around the world.
Yeah. So they're busy doing that. And through some mechanic, which I'm now a bit... They get pulled... through this
that's
stone.
How the kangaroo went around. Yeah.
And then Rincewind is the other side of this stone.
And sort of summons them without quite meaning to.
Yeah, and manages to bring them forward.
I guess because he's the only one that knows who they even are. Yeah. The side effect of this is they were trying to draw a duck. I'm like, you got the duck wrong, and now it has legs, and what's happening? And I think the point is because that was when it's being created, is that there's a lot of creative energies around, so that is...
The diaper platypus.
Indeed. But yes, I think that bit was supposed to show, look at how rude and silly these guys are, but actually it kind of was a bit more irritating than funny. You're a bit like, oh no, please stop it. You're being so unpleasant.
Yes.
But the point is, with the burst just sat there calmly and just sort of watched and was interested and smiled and kind of understood the pictures. So the wizards, having taken something from the creator and gone 1,000 years in the future, end up... with Rincewind and with the we call them the UU, Unseen University, and the BU, Bugger Up University people. So they turn up. Ridcully, who's always called Arch Chancellor with a capital A, starts referring to Arch Chancellor Rincewind, but with a lowercase a, and then you're like, how do you pronounce this? Because you have to now pronounce a word with a lowercase. Because there's one bit where Ponder starts going Arch Chancellor, and you're there like. It's like the Ridcully is very much pulling rank. Like, well, we're the very ancient university, and you are some sort of new provincial.
Yes.
Well, I guess colonial one, except not quite. But yes,
they're a polytechnic. Which would have been on par for the time.
There's also the bit where it's explained to Rincewind that you can't just sail to or from Forex because of the storms all around it, which has obviously been there for thousands of years, and that's why there's not been any rain. Which we now learn because the wizards took the thing that makes the rain. He's like, we've never seen any boats. You're from Ankh-Morpork, it's a port city. You've never seen a boat from, an Exian boat. It's because they're stuck there. And at one point, Rincewind goes, so this whole place is a prison? Which is obviously a joke to the very... I think common at the time joke, but now people don't really say a thing about, how Australia was at one point a penal colony. Well, at least it wasn't entirely that. That was just... No,
we just sent a lot of...
Transportation was a thing.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of jokes or references, I'm like, I don't think people say that anymore, but I do remember it being a thing people said, which I guess is what happens when you read a book from the 90s. The Australian wizards, because they also have a dean.
Yes.
You don't get much sense of him. But
I don't really get much sense of many of them, really. But...
it's kind of only Arch Chancellor Rincewind and the dean, but they seem a bit more laid back and pleasant and, Australian. and Rincewind sort of seems kind of fine with them, and then Ridcully... is there very much pulling rank.
Yes. Through a lot of this, we have a lot of Indigenous Australian style drawings, which seems to be where the sort of power and the sort of the kangaroo it forms in where it travels by kind of forming as a picture. But the idea is this.
But 1,000-year-old picture.
Yeah, but the idea is this picture isn't which is why the wizards are being asked about painting when the creator's painting. It's the essence of the animal, and it looks like there's extra lines and things that denote sort of time and space and
so the way the artwork is described is very much that it's not just trying to draw this is what a thing looks like, it's trying to draw this is what it would look like at all sort of all phases of its existence.
Yeah, which this is an interesting way of describing it. Obviously, Indigenous Australian artwork is very distinctive, and it is very stylised. It uses a lot of lines and dots, and it is very cool. And it's an interesting way of kind of describing that. Mm-hmm. So that's a very cool aspect of it.
I think there's the artwork combined with the whole time being scrunched up thing. So Rincewind's there in modern Forex. The wizards arrive in ancient Forex, but they're only there briefly before Rincewind kind of pulls them through. But they're just because Rincewind's shown early on by the kangaroo. a very old, thousands-year-old painting
that wasn't there last week.
Yeah, of people with pointy hats, and then it looks like it's been covered over a bit. It's almost as if someone had put their hands on to stop them going through. And the idea of the artwork is sort of trying to draw not just the creature, but like its nervous system and its skeleton and its soul.
Yeah.
And so, but yes, how the kangaroo travels is that the kangaroo will sort of like... Well, the thing is, it starts off as a